That's my bagpipe impression. Hello humans, my name is Dale Kingsmill. I'm bringing you a D&D video today, not really D&D, tabletop RPG for the people who run the game. I'm making this too complicated. I'm gonna stop myself right there. All right, so I've seen this topic come up a bunch, not necessarily like lately, but just, you know, I've noticed more of it over time. Basically, newbie DMs asking whether they're the only one who just has a horrible time running the game. Great example, I got a comment on my video the other day. This person was saying that they love the prep, they love all the aspects of being a DM or a GM, but when it comes to the actual game session, they just feel crap while running. And that is something that I hella relate to. So I'm gonna talk about a bunch of different things, but I feel like the message of this video is important to me. So, I mean, even though it doesn't really fit here, I'm gonna put it up front just for the people who will get bored and turn away halfway through, just so that they get it too. The thesis statement is gonna be, just because you feel this way, that's not a sign that you are a bad DM. So I say that this is something I see from newbie DMs, but I say that, but I don't mean like fresh off the press, like new, you've just started, yeah, you're on your first outing, although maybe it happens to them, probably, I guess. It's less hours spent invested in running the game, more like newbie in terms of you haven't completely developed or found your approach to DMing yet. You still have some things that don't work the way that you want them to. You haven't settled into it fully. So like, I count myself in amongst this cohort, and I've been DMing for what, 4-ish years now, technically. The person who left the comment the other day said that they've been doing it for 2 years, and I think part of the stress of this feeling is that you expect it to go away. You expect that it is nerves because you're new at this, so once you get more practice, you shouldn't feel that way, right? So when you're a couple years in and you're still just feeling just garbage about it, and it's not, if you haven't experienced this sensation, it's hard to describe it to you, but it's like, it's not necessarily attached to like any particular thing or event. It's not nerves about running the game. I feel like that's probably normal for everyone, even experienced people. It's just like halfway through the session, you'll just be hit with this feeling like, oh, I'm so bad at this. I'm wasting everyone's time. After the game is finished, you'll look back on it and it'll just all be regret. It's a whole bunch of negativity sort of just floating around, not tethered to any one thing. And I can't offer like a solution. I haven't found like a cure-all for this feeling. Very sorry to say, my apologies. But I can tell you some of the things I've implemented that I think have been making some difference for me. I think really, I ran a game a while ago. Actually, it was the Red Caps game. I did a video talking about some of how I ran that session. I didn't have a ton of time to prep for that session, and I kind of went in half not knowing what I was gonna do, or having to compromise and use different systems to how I would usually prep. But I came out of that session just feeling really good about it. It was the first time that I really noticed I feel much better about this session than I have about others. And it was kind of a signal to me that there are changes that I can implement. It's not something baked into the experience of running a game, a tabletop RPG. There's a car outside. It's gonna drive. But my neighbors have never, ever left their driveway within 20 seconds of starting the car. So let's just give them a solid 3 minutes. It's something that I can tweak. I can change how I'm approaching the game, and maybe that will make me feel better about it. So it is my belief that developing a process of reiteration, changing new things every time you run until you sort of hone in on what helps you enjoy the game, that's what's gonna get you through it. So here are some of mine that I have been tweaking over time, and it's not I'm not finished. It's an ongoing process. So for me, my process of reiteration. So amongst the things, because like I said, it's not any one specific thing that drags you down into this pit, but I had noticed a few things that maybe contributed to, it's like they gave a megaphone to the negative voice in my head. So let me touch on my process, my ongoing tweaks to some of those things. So combat drag was one of those things. I found this was an area where I particularly would end up feeling like I was wasting people's time, like they weren't interested in the game, like my players were here to hang out because they're friends, and just part of that bargain was that they also had to put up with me running a game. Combat was one of those places because I ran for a table of players that hadn't played the game before now. And so I tried a couple of different things around the time of Red Caps. I hadn't had time to prepare a battle mat, and I just was like, all right, we're doing Theater of the Mind for this one. And instead of actually drawing up anything, I just pulled out cards that had the bad guys' names on them, and I put them on the table, and when one of them was killed, I'd take it off the table. Just little index cards, that's all it was. And then partway through, my players sort of said, wait, where are they positioned? And I had to draw up something, but I noticed during it that Theater of the Mind, my players were more engaged, they were more likely to try things than if it was the battle map. I think the battle map made them feel like there were rules to this combat that they didn't know, and they didn't want to risk sounding like they didn't know the rules. But at the time, I didn't realize that it was Theater of the Mind that was doing it. I was using an abstracted version. It was quite narrative-centric combat rather than number crunchy combat. So I thought that maybe it was that abstracted version of combat that my players really loved. And like, TBH, they did. I wasn't wrong about that, but I continued from then in new sessions using battle maps, but with abstracted enemies, and they went back to not liking it as much. And so over time, I started to realize that maybe the good fit for me and my players was to use Theater of the Mind. Since then, I've been feeling a little bit better about it. Once COVID's over and we go back to playing, because we're not playing at the moment, I would really like to try out something new, because Theater of the Mind doesn't really work when you get to a complex combat. So something that I would like to try having a drawn up battle map on my side of the screen, so it's not distracting them or interfering with their concept of what's going on in the battle. But when they get to that point of like, oh, but where's this bad guy again? I've forgotten who's where, which one has, this condition on them. I can reference the battle map that's in front of me, or I could even lift up the screen and show them what the map looks like and then put it back down again. So that's one thing that I've tweaked to make a difference. Forgetting important descriptions. This was a big thing for me. So I come from a background of I've done many a public speaking in my time. I'm a theater kid, but I also, in my youth, in primary school and early high school, I did like speech competitions. In my early days, I tended to use palm cards with just like dot points of like, this is what you're going to talk about, and then I would speak freely. But over time, even though that is widely regarded as a better way of public speaking, I moved away from that. By the time I was at university, much preferred writing out a full script, printing out the full script, and sometimes I would go off script, but I'd always have that script to go back to so that I could read like whole silly jokes that I'd written ahead of time. Why am I telling you this? It sounds super irrelevant, but the point I'm making is I think there is kind of this encouragement to not write out too many notes for a game, because that tends to, you have to predict everything that's going to happen. It could end up railroady, all those sorts of things. But not having in-depth notes for me didn't work. I was garbage at it, I forgot important things. There would be key elements of description that I totally left out, maybe a specific event that I forgot. There was just so much going on at the table that I would forget these pre-planned things that were important to my ongoing story. So I went along the same sort of path as my speech notes. I decided to write out all my notes in full. I'd highlight in different colors so that I knew what was related to what thing. But again, I found that there was just so much happening that I didn't necessarily remember everything. I didn't hit all those points, or they would end up being not relevant as the party went off in a different direction, things like that. So then I tried a different thing. I tried writing out all my notes in full, leaving unhighlighted anything that could easily be forgotten, didn't matter. And then I put up post-it notes on the back of my DM screen so that I could pull them off every time I actually remembered to say that big important thing. Guess who forgot about the post-it notes? This gal. So that didn't function. I'm quite a bit happier with where I've landed now. I think I've landed in kind of a nice middle place. I do it like this. I mean, you won't be able to see at all from that distance, but just trust me here. I have little sections. I've got A, B, C, D, E, F, G, in a vaguely chronological order of when I expect these things to be encountered. And I've taken to writing out not all my notes in full, but important descriptions in full. So this, for example, says, this is entry E, not that it matters to you. The inside is brighter than most pubs you've been to. Plenty of windows to let in the afternoon sun. You can see over the counter through to the preparation space, a bench covered in herbs and vegetables, a leg of ham, some fish, and beyond that a blazing hearth. You can smell the cooking of onions and carrots and gravy, and you are starkly reminded that you haven't eaten a real hot meal in about a week. You can only see a couple of patrons at a table in the corner. One of them, a man about 60, dark skin, looks at you warily. He stands up and pushes through a door into the back room. Compared to some of these other notes, I've just got really basic, like, one-sentence descriptions of the NPCs who are in there. So I kind of found this halfway point where it's almost like at certain checkpoints of the story, that's when I can turn to my notes and read out, like, it's almost like my own box text. I find it particularly useful for the beginning of combat. I can really sort of set the mood, set the scene, and I find it gets my players into a headspace where they're, like, excited to do the next scene. Maybe that would work for you, maybe it wouldn't, but the point is that something wasn't working for me, and every new session I tried something slightly different until I found something I liked better. So I come from a theatre background. I have a lot more improv experience than a lot of people, probably. I've been doing it in some form since I was like, what age is year 3? 8, 9? So by all means, I should not be freaked out about improv by now. And yet, here I stand, a miracle to behold. Improv really stresses me out, voices stress me out, regardless of the fact that I improv a bunch and I do a bunch of voices all the time. In that regard, I haven't even found a solution yet. In the short term, what I've done for my process of reiteration, changing little bits at a time, I'm currently at a stage where any new important NPC, I kind of plan an introductory first line that gives an impression of who I want them to be. I inevitably immediately fall out of that. When my characters met Rafe in the back of that tavern, I've just got this one line here that says, "Oh my god, is there someone there? Someone who isn't a kidnapper? Hello?" That's the only line I've written for him, but it kind of, it was trying to give myself an idea of who Rafe is, what I need him to be representing in this scene. I'm sure if I had other really important dialogue I needed him to hit, I would have written that down too. As it stands, the rest of his notes are just notes about, you know, stuff that the players will probably ask him, but it's not written in character, it's just information for me. Like normal NPC notes. And the other thing regarding the voices, for a while I just stopped doing voices. And I felt bad about it because my players liked it when I did voices. I started the game doing voices, the campaign, but then at some point I was stressing myself out about it too much. Particularly, I don't know what would happen. I can do various accents, but it was always like the first couple things I said in character in one of these accents, I would just do the wrong accent. And then it was really hard to sort of scramble back to where I wanted to be. I am not a voice actor. So I just straight up stopped doing accents for a while, and I'm slowly building back into it because it is something that I find fun and that I would like to get more practiced at. But if it was gonna be ruining my experience of running the game, you know, it wasn't worth the trade-off for me for that period of time. Answering questions on the fly, on the other hand, that's a tricky one. You know, players, so much comes from them. And it's a game of reacting as the DM. And sometimes they're gonna ask you a question to which you just don't know the answer. This one I think is honestly, this one's a one-stop fix that you just gotta practice at. You have to get cool with not knowing. Be patient with yourself, allow yourself time to answer a question, to think about what the answer might be, because sometimes it'll come to you, sometimes it's important that you say something, you know, maybe they're asking an NPC a question and you sort of have to stop and think about what that NPC might say in response. And that's fine, take your time, answer slowly, your friends will be fine. The players are there to play, not to judge you. And sometimes you just won't know the answer. One of my players, after they'd killed a particular baddie, turned to me and said, I go through all her pockets, does she have any notes or anything that might explain what's going on? And I thought to myself, for a good long while, would she have something in her pockets? And eventually I had to say to him, look, I think the answer is yes. I get the feeling she would have a note in her pocket somewhere that might tell you something, but I'm not sure what it is yet. So I'll have to get back to you outside of the session once I've had some time to think about it. Guess what? Player was fine with it. Human beings communicating is good? Actually, what? So those are my biggest tips maybe, just to be patient with yourself and get chill with being able to say, I don't know the answer, but I can work it out for you and let you know. It lets them see behind the curtain a little bit, maybe breaks a little edge of the creative veil, but it gets to serve as a security blanket for you, which I think in these formative stages, because that's what you're doing, you're developing, you're forming your own approach to the game. I think a security blanket is a good thing during that time. You don't want to put too much pressure on yourself and make you not want to run the game ever again. That's not the goal. The car's back. And finally, oh, this one's a doozy, perceived player disengagement. Here's the thing, is that when you feel this way, when you come out of a session just feeling generally like it was bad and like it was probably your fault, I think a lot of it gets attached to this concept that the players aren't enjoying themselves. And again, it's not sourced from these things, from any particular event, but these events, these little things that you notice can feed into it. So for me, I've got a big group of friends who all like hanging out, and they would get together and they would chat and chat and chat. And then sometimes in the middle of a game, they would get distracted and start chatting. And I would just sit there and go, oh man, I'm so bad at this. So the couple of things I've tweaked in that regard that have been working for me, they're a little odd. One thing that I do is that now I start every session, I asked each of my players to send me a song that they think of as the theme song for their character, at least at this stage of the game. And they all sent those along, and then I picked a song to sort of represent the team's theme song. And now at the start of a session, I play that particular playlist of songs, always ending in the team song. And so people can arrive and start chatting with each other and catch up on stuff. But the minute that we hear that team song, it kind of signals to everyone, okay, the game's about to begin, we should get ready to play. The other thing I've found, this is really odd. Everyone brings food along to eat, to snack on while they play. And I have legit no idea why this worked. But when I moved the food, instead of having the food set up on the table that we were playing at, moving the food to a table off to the side, and people would get up and go and get a plate of food and bring it back, for some reason, that made all the difference to table chatter mid-game. Why? Who knows? My working theory is that like having the food there made it feel like any other time that we hang out, whereas moving it to the side and having this table dedicated to just game stuff, I guess there might have been some kind of a subconscious thing of like, oh, this isn't exactly like every other time that we hang out. Maybe, I don't know, but it worked. So there's a tip if you're having that problem. There are other things that don't bother me so much, I've discovered. I thought that they might, but as I've sort of tweaked things as I went along, I've discovered that they don't bother me. Table chatter that's actually relevant to the game, I have found super comforting as a DM. So like if I have these two players asking me something specific that to do with what they want to do in this town or whatever, I can give them my full attention, and I know that the other three players in this corner are just gonna talk amongst themselves quietly in character. They're gonna have their own fun little hijinks on the side, and maybe I'm not gonna be privy to it, which is a little sad. I love hearing the hijinks, but it brings me so much joy when I tune back in and I hear them having their own little fun moments in character. So that is something that quite the opposite of bothers me. I feel really great about that. That's something that makes me feel way better about my games. And players having phones out, I've actually discovered that doesn't typically bother me at all, because often my players will pull out their phone to you know, video something that's happening that they find exciting and they'll put it on Snapchat or on Instagram. And so players having their phones has ended up being another thing that I can use as a measure that makes me feel more confident and better about my games, because I'm like, oh, they're really enjoying this. They're enjoying this so much they want to share it. So phones and quiet in-character chatter don't bother me at all, I've discovered. And so I've kept those things while weeding out the ones that really stress me out. So I don't know, these might not be the things that stress you out about your game. They definitely were lots of little contributing factors to my own miserable post-game feelings. But what I'm trying to say is that I think this process might be helpful for you. Sit down and try to identify some of the little contributing factors and change how you go about them. Because to me, it seems like that might be part of it, might play a role in why we tend to see this feeling more from newer DMs and less from sort of the old guard who've been doing this for years and years and years, decades. Because maybe they've had enough time to work out how they enjoy it, whereas we're new at this. And there's such a huge wave of us who are new to it as well. We're just finding our sea legs. You gotta find what works for you rather than just doing what you think you should be doing. And I will say, actually, specifically stopping for this video and thinking about the sessions I've run over the last year or so, well, you know, back when we were still allowed to see people in person, I can look at those sessions and notice that there has been a huge difference for me. I feel way, way better about those sessions than I do about ones from the start of last year or the year before. Oh, the year before. Oof. So again, I will state it again very clearly. If you have these feelings, if you feel this kind of DM anxiety, just seriously know that it's not a secret sign to you that you're bad at DMing. Not even close. I feel like there's this negative voice in all our heads that tries to tell us that's what it is. Oh, you feel miserable because you did a bad job. But it's not. That ain't it. Not even close. You're gonna be fine. I believe in you. But no, it's something that I wanted to talk about because it's something I super duper relate to. It is a horrible feeling, but there are so many other aspects of the game to enjoy. So if you don't feel good enough about it yet, that's fine. That's perfectly fine. We're all gonna get there. We just gotta keep tweaking, keep going. We gotta do what we gotta do. So anyway, that's all I have to say about that. Ha ha ha. If you're new here, this is my YouTube channel. I'm sure you could tell. I also have a Twitter account at Daily Dale and other socials as well that can be found in the description below. If you enjoyed the video, you can hit the buttons. You know how YouTube works. Apart from that, I do believe that's it. I'm done. Email this to your grandma. You're gonna be fine. You're gonna do great. I believe in you. I demand to know why it is so hot. It is September. Global warming's a problem, yo.